All right, hey guys, how we doing? Sam here with you. It's Friday the 25th here, and I'm gonna dig a little deeper into the Bitcoin relentless bear here. See, so now I just did a little quickie update here, which you all can view here. So, and I just outlined the potentially the more optimistic account, which I think is it's certainly technically valid. It's these two areas here that are making the count difficult to get a read on. So just to quickly review here, we're working on the idea we've got a combination. So we'd have a W, X, Y, X, Z. Well, the question is, where's the X? All right, so the first ABC, pretty clear. All right, this certainly, it works well. Actually, the X would be here. So this works as an X. I can get a clear ABC into a Y. Now, this, right, here's the question mark. So there's a nice three-wave counter trend rally here. So this can certainly serve as the X. Now this, maybe this is my bullish bias, but if that's the X, then I have the opportunity to be in the process of finishing. So I've got to finish in an ABC to give me the Z wave. Well, right off the bat, it's a little bit troublesome in that the symmetry is not what you'd hope for, right? So just looking at it, you can see, is the A in the B? Well, let's come back here. Are these related, right? Is that AB? Could we finish down here and have decent symmetry here? I don't know if I can pull this off. It's possible. It's ideally you'd have something cleaner than that. You'd have something more like this, right? Much like this one here. So this ABC, I can almost, right? So if we just look at it here, so now more depth, but look at the angle here. Let's come back here. All right, so something like that, right? So then you put it there, and that's a little bit more what you'd be looking for. So you got to question it. Now, just to review here, and I've shown this count before. This has been my primary count. It requires that you have to accommodate a few idiosyncrasies here. There's a very, I'm on a 4-hour here. You'd have to dig a 1-2 out of that corner, which you're stretching a little bit probably, but you can get it. So you can get a 3-4, and there's a little diagonal to give you a potential one wave here. Well, then you'd have to go into an expanded flat. So you'd have to have a 3-3-5. So drawing that up, as I just did on the little short one, you'd have to do it this way. Now, the hesitation there is that this is just a straight wick pump, right? So how are you going to dig the subdivision out of that? You can't really. It's just not there. So now technically valid here. So we'd have a 3-3-5, right? Assuming there's 5 in there. But it's hard to. So well, let me just finish the thought here. So if that's our 1-2, well, then we come down here and we can work this triangle in here, so we can get we can get all the subdivision to get down to a third here. You'd have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 into the third. So it plays, right? So you could have it finishing this way, so that you'd have 1, 2, 3 triangle into the 4 is what I think is happening there, and we'd come down for the 5. So we'd finish it that way. Now the symmetry is not bad there, right? So this sideways action here, right? So we don't see the triangle, but that's not bad actually, right? So that's a contender. Now we can't even be definitive about the triangle yet until we need to kick up to the upper edge here, give us the E wave of that triangle, which would be our 4, and then we're anticipating 5 to come down here to finish. That puts us in the 2600 to 2400 range to give us that 5. So completing that 5. I don't hate the count, right? We deal with some of the issue here, in that we had this little zigzag here, so we don't get a clean diagonal here. So this plays better as a B, C, D. Now we need the E, and we need the drive lower to complete this count. So that's one that we can't eliminate, right? It's the more friendly of the two, because the alternate, and this is, we senseis and Quan and I and Monty, we all talk, and we look, and we try and come up with what's the consensus count here? And we both are kind of struggling, I should say we're all kind of struggling with how to process here. So the alternate, and this is actually Hove's alternate here, that it's just it's equally valid. Right? So that's what's making Bitcoin so tough here, is that you have equally valid counts here. So it just becomes a matter of probability here. So it's hard to argue with this idea as a triangle. So of course, we can't have a triangle in the second, so you can't be thinking 1, 2. So you got to get there somehow. So how else could we do it? Well, the alternate would be that we're taking the x over here. All right, so this would have to change. So let me grab my tool here and we can show it to you this way. So you'd have to do it this way. So this would have to be A, B, C, D, E. Well, oh yeah, I guess we'd have to have it be here, and then this would be the 1, 2 before we start down. So this would no longer be the 5. So this would have to come out of there. So we'd have to do it this way. So this would be A, B, C. Well, let me raise that up here. Let's go to a different color and take it up a degree so we can see it a little bit better. So you'd have to do it this way. So we'd have A, B, C, D, E. All right, so that is potentially, we can have a triangle as the X wave here. Excuse me, guys. I'm getting a bit of a cold. So that, I guess you could do it. You have to extend it out here. So we'd ultimately have something like this as our X wave. Now, the discouraging bit of that is that if that's the X, then we're just starting. So this, already kind of you run out of options here. So the Z would have to be lower. So if this is, now if that's the X and we've done a 1, 2, now we can still work with this triangle. So potentially we've got 3, 4, and 5 going in. Symmetry, not quite as good. Not quite as good. So you'd have a very short 1, a tiny 2. But and then of course you look at the size of the 2 relative to the 4. So I hesitate a little on this because, so I guess I will remind you, symmetry matters here. So this, and then the alternate, right? So this would be the A wave. So if that's the X, then we're just putting in the A wave here, going for a B, and then we'd be looking for a C. That's much more bearish. So I'm certainly hopeful that that's not the path we're headed down. So this would be our 4, so we'd be still in the process of finishing the A wave, which would be finishing at the target on the other count that would have us finishing down here. So yeah, of course we can't ignore it. So if we look here, and then we'd be anticipating this, and then we'd come down here. Now that's potentially putting us below 2,000. So I'm not ready to lean into that as my primary count, although it's certainly technically valid. Excuse me, guys. Well, let's just think. Let's play it through. So if this were the X and we were going to start the 1 here and we were to finish down here, right? So just kind of working through an algo target. If we finish down here the A wave, now let's assume. God damn it. Let's assume we get the B here at the golden zone. So where does that put us? So just using the algo target there, that put us finishing down here at around, well, let's call it 1,500. Can't discount it, right? It's technically valid. There's nothing wrong with it. A, B, C into the Y, A, B, C, D, E into the X. Now we're in the process of trying to finish the A, B, C. So these two triangles are what's making it difficult. Now there's different ways to look at this. So you've seen me do it this way, where I'm just going to pull some of this off. And we've looked at various alternatives, but this sideways, we're just going sideways, suggests that it's likely a triangle. So there's a couple of different ways. So this, I've shown this before. We looked at this as a potential range, and then we're just stuck in this range. So if we look at the potential for range expansion, initial range, 50% of the range, 100% of the range. Now, it's not to the tick, but pretty darn close. So that's so you look here and you think, well, is this just a series of ranges within ranges? Because you could do the same thing down here and say, okay, well, here's a range, So this was technically significant down here as we hit this level. That's doubling of the range. Do we have the exact same kind of thing happening here? Are we just stuck in another range? Well, that's where you start thinking about the idea. So we're sitting just smack dab in the middle of it. Right now we've rolled a little bit lower. So if we're heading down here lower, then look where that puts it. Right, so that potentially 100% of that range. Now we're down around 1900. So there's no clear way to resolve. We can't resolve until we get some clarity as to what's happening here. If this is a triangle, right, then the anticipation is that it's not done forming and that we're still in need of this move. Now, is that finishing us, or is that just starting the A wave of the BC? Let's hope. Let's hope for the alternate. Let's hope for let me say it this way, for the primary, which I started with, because this is ultra bearish. Now, certainly possible. No way to eliminate it, right, until we get more information here. We need a significant sustained break, not just a pump wick, where everybody gets all excited because we have a pump wick, then immediately we pump down. We need a sustained move. And we need to start blowing through some of the resistance on the way back up. So if I take this off here and we just go back to a measured move, and we just take the low here. Now I'm going to have to change that. Let's go back. All right, so this prior area here where we had all this congestion, that's going to need to come up here. Well, I guess we'll have to redraw that. So we need, if this is going to change, if we're going to change the probable outcome here of something other than that, well, then this is going to need to get real busy, right? We're going to need a big sustained move here. First test is the 50. You see let me do it this way. You see the prior resistance here. So the structure, we got to get through that structure at the 50, which is why this count, if the A and the B are going in, you can see how some of that would make sense. But if this is going to resolve itself and we're headed lower, at least we have a fairly clear idea of where we are in the count. Then equally, it'll be a question mark, and we won't know until we see how the reaction is here. If we get a pivot down here in this area, let's call it, just to round it out, let's call it 2000. If we get a pivot off of that, well, we're going to need a big, hard, fast motive to come out of the hole down here. And we're gonna we don't want anything like this, right? We don't want nice symmetrical ABC, as that's going to tee us up for the last move down. We need a nice big, we need an ABC, and then we need a 4-5 to come off of a low down here. Otherwise, we're just going to keep grinding lower, right? So each of these become like a base is built here, right? And then unless we get some bullish movement or news or something, right? It becomes the base before we drop lower. Just as this became the base, and everybody thought, oh, we're in the range, we're going to hold here before we break, and it was the break lower. Well, it seems like it would be overly optimistic to anticipate anything other than the same outcome here, coming from this range to this range, and then we put the Elliott count on it, and it all implies there's at the very least one more drive lower. Just very hard to get a count out of this, and this certainly doesn't look like this was significant. This all looks corrective. Now there's a wild card possibility here that this is a 1-2 and the low's in, but I think that's low probability, and I certainly wouldn't trade off of that. Now, would I keep an eye on it as a possible alternate of an alternate? Sure, why not? Right? Certainly there's a possibility here that there's a low here, and we've gone 1-2. Right? We don't have an algo behind us, so we've already broken the 65. So I wouldn't be an aggressive buyer, how about I say it that way? But I wouldn't necessarily be loading up for the move lower either, because we're just stagnant. So I'd want to see confirmation one way or the other. If we come down here, then that first retrace, that could be attractive. That's a contender for potentially a long entry. Recognizing that we're going to run into all of this resistance on the way up, and we're going to need a big 3, 4, and 5 to really confirm that there's a low in. But no, I certainly wouldn't try and pick the bottom here. I'd look for a reaction, then take the first retrace. And I'd wait to see how this resolves. So even if we just look at this range here, whether we're looking at the range of that triangle or just the range here from this pivot to this pivot, we got to come out of this with conviction. We can't just barely poke our head through, and then we need to come out of here with some strength and with some volume and some buying and maybe some news behind it. Otherwise, path of least resistance remains lower. All right, guys, that's the prettiest that's the prettiest shade of lipstick I can put on what is currently quite the pig. Sad to say, but right, would just take one nice motive wave to make things look better. Right now, that's a pig with lipstick. All right, guys, talk to you later.